Hey all, how's everyone? You're with me, Mr. Dex, and welcome to the channel. I'm back again after New Year's break. Hope everybody enjoyed theirs. Today I've got some more handy tips and throwing back to my first sniping tutorial. If I recall correctly, it was an absolute monster, 40 minutes long. Not what many people would call interesting or worth 39 minutes of my life, but hey, that's why we're back here. Shorter videos with better explanations. I learn as I go. But if you did watch my first tutorial and you actually managed to stay awake through it, you'd have probably noticed that I tried to cram way too much content into one video. I ended up speaking way too fast and not enough detail. So here's what I hope will be the first in a series of a few slightly shorter videos on the subject of improving your gameplay from my perspective as an aggressive scout. So getting straight into it, in my last guide I listed 5 principles to smart gameplay in Battlefield 1. Decision making, speed, movement, accuracy, and lastly, defense. I thought I'd try and do a guide at each of these, starting with this one, an aggressive sniper's guide to defense, or what I like to call Mr. Dex's handy guide to help you not get shot in the face so much. I thought it'd be a good place to start, given there will be a number of players who will have just got the game for Christmas and might be trying to figure out how they die so much. So for those of you in this situation, hopefully you'll find some of this really helpful. I'm going to talk about 2 things mostly for this video. The first is cover, and the second is movement. So let's start with the basics. What is cover? Cover is an object or structure in the environment that, when positioned directly between you and an enemy player, reduces your visibility to the enemy player, and therefore the area that you can take damage. Or more simply, something you can hide behind so you don't get shot. There are 2 main types of cover in the game. Vertical cover, like walls, trees, sides of buildings, or any other vertical surface you have to look around, that is to the left or right to see. And horizontal cover, which can be anything from rocks, fences, and windows to the terrain of the map itself. And it's basically any horizontal surface that covers a portion of the lower part of your body, but you can still potentially see over the top. There is a third kind of cover, I suppose, visual cover, which is anything that obscures your visibility but doesn't physically protect you from being shot, such as smoke grenades, for example, but I won't really go into that. Also, I should point out at this point that a lot of the cover in Battlefield 1 is destructible, so do keep that in mind. But anyway, let's get into how to tackle the 2 main kinds of cover, starting with the horizontal cover. When taking cover behind a horizontal surface, the first thing you should do is take note of how high it is. Does it completely block your exposure while standing? And what about when you crouch? Most of the horizontal cover in Battlefield 1 is designed to cover you mostly while crouching, and your head will peek out of the top sometimes. When you're taking cover from behind something horizontal, push up as close to it as possible and crouch. It's a bit tough to explain, but this will limit as many angles of exposure as possible and allows you to peek over the top for quick shots. To help you picture this, if you cover your face with your hands, you can't see anything. But if you slowly move your hands away, you'll notice you can start to see more and more. That's the idea. The closer you are to the cover, the better it protects you, at the cost of some visibility. Also, and this might be a little tough to explain, but if you're closer to the cover than your opponent, you have what I call control over the cover. So to help show you what I mean, in this clip I'm facing off with an enemy sniper who's positioned a little over the hill. I'm closer to the ridge of the hill than he is, and so with a small movement, I can choose whether I have line of sight on him or whether I'm back taking cover. Whereas he can't really do that easily, because he has to move further to achieve the same thing. So basically, I get to decide when we shoot at each other, and he can only react, which is much slower and gives me a huge advantage. What I also like to do is something I half explained a second ago called a crouch bounce, which is where you crouch behind cover and basically bounce up and down between the stand and the crouch positions. It gives you back your visibility, because you can see every couple of seconds or so, but you're still relatively well protected and quite difficult to hit. To make this technique easier, I recommend console players switch the crouch to the right analog stick by going into the control scheme options. So this basically reverses your melee and your crouch. So your melee will be the circle, or I think B is the Xbox equivalent, and the crouch button is the analog stick. If you do come under fire while you're in partial cover, feel free to wiggle around a little bit, but try not to move around too much, because all you're going to do is expose your sides and make yourself a larger target. Anyway, this crouch bounce is particularly effective for the Scouts class, who can peek and shoot between rechambering a bullet, whereas for the other classes it's probably more effective to fire in bursts for the kill, and then pop back into cover as you figure out who to kill next. If you're using the terrain as your cover, like a sand dune in one of the desert maps, as a scout I like to stand a meter or 2 behind the ridge, so most of my upper body is covered, and work my way back along the top of the ridge, occasionally snapping for quick shots. Standing still and lying prone just exposes you to sniper fire, and you don't really want that. Where possible as well, I like to position myself so I can only see one enemy at a time. I kill that guy, and then the next time I peek, I move a little further out so I can see somebody else. For vertical covers like walls, it's a little bit more tricky because you won't be able to see without exposing a fair portion of your body. So you have to be really quick. Strafe or sprint out to the side, get a shot off, and then get back to cover. As a scout, it's best not to even bother swapping to your pistol while exposed. Go back to cover, rechamber or swap to your pistol, and then peek again if you have to. This not only minimizes the time you're exposed, but it also forces any would-be shooters to react to your movement twice instead of just once, which means you can catch them off guard and swing the odds in your favor. This tactic works for your other classes as well, so feel free to play about. The last thing I'll mention on cover is when you're moving to a new area, take it slow, and the first thing you should be doing is finding cover and limiting your exposure. That way, if there is an enemy nearby, you will have the advantage. So that was cover. I hope it made sense. Now let's have a look at movement. So the first thing I need to mention on movement is that slow-moving, predictable, or stationary targets are much easier to hit. So the key to movement is unpredictability, and the key to unpredictability is speed. Now to avoid confusion, I don't mean that you should be rushing around the map, but your evasive movements need to be fast and unpredictable. This will be easier with a higher sensitivity because sprinting is faster than strafing left or right, and you can change direction faster with a higher sensitivity. So if you're exposed and being shot at, don't be Rickon Stark, sprint and zigzag your way to cover. The next bit is for the snipers, because while you might think that firing a bullet per second is a disadvantage, in some circumstances it can work in your favor. Quick scoping, turning, sprint sliding, and quick scoping is a seriously effective method for dodging bullets and getting kills. Also, sliding behind or towards a target, getting a shot on him and finishing with a knife or a pistol is also really fast and effective because players with low sensitivity will struggle to react to your movement. Remember also that aim assist is not great at following fast-moving targets, and you can actually outrun the aim assist for a bit, particularly now that they've nerfed the aim assist. But after a slide or two at most, you do slow down and you will eventually get caught. But trust me, if you get good at this, you can survive in a lot of one-on-one situations in close range a lot of the time. Now, I personally am not, and I don't think it's a necessity, but if you are using the aim assist on the console in close range with this tactic, you are really deadly, even against the shotgunners. This is easily the most satisfying thing you can do as a scout, getting the best of a shotgunner in a tight space. But again, the higher sensitivity, the faster you will move, and the more likely it is that you will succeed. I'm working on improving my accuracy while doing this at the moment. It's harder without the aim assist, like quite difficult, but it's the way to go. Try and incorporate these quick scope tactics into all sort of close to medium range engagements. You will miss a lot to start with, but you'll get better over time, and it really will help with your aim. The last point I wanted to make about movement is to do with pushing and attacking objectives, because I think that a lot of players, particularly new ones, are dying a lot because they rush into situations without checking it out first. In general, I think the best approach is to push slowly and gather as much information as possible before moving forward. Check your corners, clear the buildings, and work your way forward. Don't just run around between flags. Also, just because you've killed someone doesn't mean it's safe for you to leave cover. Just wait a second or two and see if it has any buddies around that aren't paying attention. What I like to do is hold a specific area and wait for support. Push into a house, for example, and say to yourself, "This house is mine," and defend it until an opportunity arises to push on. You obviously don't need to do this every time, but if you do keep this tactic as an option, it will help slow and break down the game a bit. I think a massive mistake people make is to just cap a flag and then sprint on to the next one. You're really rolling the dice. All it takes is a handful of enemies running the other way, and suddenly you have very little control over what happens to you. And that's my point. If you slow down your gameplay, but not your invasive movements, make that clear, and use your cover well, you will be in control of the majority of 1v1s, and you'll win more of them. So let your enemy come to you. Defense is often the best form of attack, and to be honest, while it's particularly important for aggressive sniping, this applies to all classes. If you adapt this mentality, you will win more battles and get shot in the face less. So there you have it, guys. Hopefully this has helped out a bit. It seems fairly obvious to a few of you, I'm sure, but it's amazing how easy it is to fall into the trap of just running around between objectives. So if you think about these kinds of things as you play, you should see an improvement, I think. You should die much, much less often. I will be releasing a few more videos on topics related to improving your gameplay over the next few weeks, probably the next one coming out a couple of weeks from now. So stay tuned for that one. Do let me know your thoughts in the comments. Throw us a like or subscribe if you found it useful. Thanks very, very much for watching, guys. Really appreciate it. Till next time, take care.